You're listening to the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set up to bring you news, interesting topics, and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 537. I'm your host, Anders Spinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. See ya!
Hejsan Anders, have you planned your SkeptiCamp talk yet for October?
I am actually planning it. Ooh. I haven't yet applied.
Ooh, because the big news is that it's now open for applications. So if you're going to Liverpool to attend the European Skeptics Congress...
Which you should.
Yeah, which you should. 16th to 18th of October this year. You can apply to give a talk at SkeptiCamp, which is on the Friday.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with that, the SkeptiCamp talks are lightning talks, 10-minute long talks that you can apply to do. If there are many applications, there will be a bit of a selection process. My understanding is that it's randomized in a way. It's a cool thing, and it's a really interesting gathering of people talking about stuff of their interest. Mostly, they do have a skeptical angle. A lot of different ideas, topics are being discussed, and it's usually well attended as well. So
it is a lot of fun. And the two of us usually try to get a talk in there. I haven't decided what to do this year, but I'll probably try to come up with something because it's such fun.
Yeah.
I hope I will make it, but if you are interested, you can go to sitp.online, and we will of course put the link in the show notes. Yeah, but if you go there is a form where you can apply to do this talk, and you should come. Well, and even if you don't want to talk, you should come and just to listen to the rest of the people talking. Usually it's around, maybe 16 or even 20 sometimes talks. I don't know exactly how many they can cram in. It is really, really fun to just be bombarded with lots of information, and often some people do it very seriously, and that's fine. Some do it with a lot of humor, and that is also fun. It's always informative and interesting. It's a good time.
Yeah, it is indeed. All right, something to look forward to there. But as a listener of the show, you probably look forward to what we have to deliver to you this week. You can rest assured that there are lots of things, including a TWISH item, which stands for This Week in Skeptical History. This week, we celebrate the birthday of one of the true pioneers of modern astrophysics, Father Angelo Secchi, born on the 28th of June 1818 in Reggio Emilia, Italy, which is really close to my heart, especially at the moment, because I'm currently around the area of Naples. I'm in Castellammare di Stabia. Actually, as I look out the window of my hotel room, I am looking at Mount Vesuvius.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyhow, Father Secchi was a Jesuit priest, and he was also one of the most influential scientists of the 19th century. He was the director of the observatory of the Roman College. He helped transform astronomy from science concerned mainly with charting the celestial objects and where they were into one that asked what they actually were. So that is a pretty cool transition. So his greatest achievement was pioneering the use of spectroscopy to study the stars. By analyzing starlight, Secchi realized that stars could be grouped according to their spectra. Essentially, their chemical fingerprints is what we're talking about. His 4-class classification system, introduced in the 1860s, became the direct ancestor of the stellar classification that astronomers still use today.
Wow.
And in many ways, he helped give birth to astrophysics as we know it. But his curiosity wasn't really confined to the heavens either. He also invented the so-called Secchi disk. It's a simple black and white disk that oceanographers still lower into the water today to measure the transparency of the water. It's not a big, huge invention, but it's a really cool tool to measure transparency. Not bad for someone who spent most of his career looking up rather than down. So he was just very curious and inventive. But from a skeptical point of view, I think Secchi's most fascinating legacy comes from an entirely unintended consequence of his observations of Mars, the red planet. During the late 1850s, Angelo Secchi carefully mapped the Martian surface through the telescope at the Observatorio di Collegio Romano. He noted long, faint linear features and described them using the perfectly ordinary Italian word, canali, which means channels or grooves. One of the most prominent of them he named the Canale Atlantico. And that is completely fine. And that should have been the end of the story, except it wasn't. Because Secchi never suggested these features were artificial. He was a meticulous observer who repeatedly emphasized the limitations of telescopes and the need for cautious interpretation. So his canali were simply descriptive labels for indistinct markings while glimpsing through Earth's turbulent atmosphere. But a couple of decades later, another Italian astronomer, whose name is probably very familiar to all skeptics, Giovanni Schiaparelli, produced much more detailed maps of Mars, using the same terminology. But when those maps reached the English-speaking world, canali was famously translated not as channels, but as canals. And this really blew out of proportion completely. Because this one small linguistic shift from a natural feature to an engineered one proved remarkably expensive for scientific skepticism, because people started talking about Martian canals obviously built, and that gave rise to the idea of Martians in general. So that was really weird. So this mistranslation ignited imaginations on both sides of the Atlantic. Most famously, the American astronomer Percival Lowell became convinced that Mars was home to an advanced but desperate civilization that had built a vast planetary irrigation network to carry water from the polar ice caps, which were known to be ice caps due to spectroscopy as well. So this is the cool twist of this whole story. He founded an observatory. Percival Lowell founded an observatory in Arizona, mapped hundreds of ruler straight canals, and confidently presented them as evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial engineers. And the public loved it. The idea inspired novels, newspaper headlines, and helped shape early science fiction, including A.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds. So this is how far it reached, this whole idea that came about with a mistranslation of a single word. Meanwhile, many astronomers remained unconvinced. They pointed out that the supposed canals appeared inconsistent, varied from one observer to another. Now, that's a very telltale sign, actually, to be honest. And we're suspiciously dependent on the quality of the telescope as well, and the imagination of the observer as well. So that is another thing to add. And eventually, spacecraft settled that matter. When NASA's Mariner 4 flew past Mars in 1965, its close-up photographs revealed a cratered landscape with no trace of a global network of perfectly straight canals. The famous lines had been little more than optical illusions. And, well, it looks like our pattern-hungry brains connected blurry patches into neat geometric structures, which is a classic example of what we now call pareidolia. And that's why Angelo Secchi deserves a place in skeptical history, I believe. Not because he started the Martian canal myth, but because he didn't. So his story is basically a good example of careful scientific observations and how they can become distorted through mistranslation, confirmation bias, and a public eager for extraordinary conclusions. Because Secchi himself embodied the virtues of good science. He did careful observations, he was aware of uncertainty, and he was reluctant to claim more than the evidence allowed, which is very weird for a priest as well. So But he died in 1878 before the Great Martian Canal craze reached its peak. So fortunately, he never really saw it through and would probably have been astonished to learn that one perfectly innocent Italian word had helped launch a century of speculation about Martian engineers. Yeah. So let's celebrate him on his birthday. Father Angelo Secchi.
Very cool.
He was born on the 28th of June, 1818. But that brings us to the next thing, which is the news round.
So, I know it can be very repetitious to hear about it all the time, but the climate is changing, people. And we're seeing it all around us right now. Even here in Sweden, we are now looking at over 32, 33 degrees Celsius in the coming weekend. Today, or rather yesterday, it was 27 or 28. And if you're a US listener, just one translation, that's around 91 degrees Fahrenheit, just to give you a ballpark feeling for that. If we look at the UK, temperatures on Tuesday this week hit a high of 34.6 degrees Celsius, with schools, hospitals and transport networks and water companies struggling to cope with the extreme temperatures. Southeast England is expected a record temperature of 39 degrees on Thursday, which is when we are recording this. There are warnings now that UK's infrastructure is not built for a climate like this. It's built for a climate that no longer exists, and they have to take measures to fix things. They have reduced rail speeds and services, so trains cannot go at normal speed due to probably the railroads physically bending, because that often happens in warm weather. Hospital patient appointments have been cancelled, school closures across southern England and Wales, hosepipe bans in southeast England. The UK's Met Office issued a rare red weather warning for Wednesday and Thursday, and a red heat alert was issued indicating, quote, a risk to life for even the healthy population, end quote. So it's not just, it's bad enough, if it's elderly and sick people but even perfectly healthy people can become hurt by this. Great Britain has paid at least 6 times the normal price for imported electricity as well, as millions of people are turning on their air conditioning and wind farms are not able to supply enough power. Then we have France. As we record this, I think it's still the case that 68,000 households are without power due to the grid not being able to cope for this. And so on. It's bad all over Europe, the UK and France as examples. But how are things in Hungary? Anders, I know you're now in Italy, so maybe you should tell us how it's in Italy.
Well, in Italy, it's ridiculously hot. We are talking about 33 to 36 degrees in the south. Mm-hmm. But what was really heartbreaking to see was the devastation that the droughts caused in the north of Italy, especially when we crossed the River Po a couple of days ago. I realized that I've been coming here for 18 years to Italy, crossing the River Po. And I've never seen the water level being that low. Mm-hmm. Very close to the estuary, it really looked like you could basically just walk through the river.
And this is not a minor river. This is a river that is big enough for me to have studied in primary school. You had to memorize that river. It's big enough.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be.
Well, it's the largest river of Italy. Mm-hmm. It's almost 700 kilometers long.
And now just a few meters wide, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It was ridiculous. I was shocked to see that. But in Hungary, we have regions where there is shortage of water as well. People are being warned that they should stay inside and not go out on the sun. And yet, what we're going to do today and the days after, we're going to be standing outside and just walking under the sun.
Wow. Be careful. Take care.
This is what tourism does to you.
Yeah, right. Okay. So when we look at the science right now, as I understand it, now I'm not an expert, I'm just reading the papers, but right now there seems to be a sort of lid of hot air looming over Europe that has come from North Africa, and it's expected to last for a week or so. And of course, ultimately, it is because we humans keep adding more and more energy into the atmospheres and into the oceans. And that has effects. More and more energy has to go somewhere.
Just a small correction. We are not adding more energy. We are ruining the capability of the energy coming from the sun escaping
that is correct.
The surface or the levels close to the surface. So normally part of that would be escaping out into the outer space. However, we are keeping it inside the system of the Earth's atmosphere, and that's the problem. Just a small correction.
No, that is correct. It's not the heat from the fires that are warming the globe.
Exactly.
It is the greenhouse gases that it produces.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Meanwhile, we hear a lot about El Niño, the recurring phenomenon in the South Pacific that has an effect on the whole global climate. This is a normal, natural phenomenon that has existed, I don't know how long, but for a long, long time. So every couple of years, this happens. But it gets reinforced by anthropogenic global warming. And there is a big El Niño predicted on the way. And in fact, this week, scientists have confirmed that they can now see that El Niño has officially started. They can't tell exactly how big it will be or how big effect it will have yet, which also means this El Niño thing that we hear so much about has nothing to do with the current heat wave in Europe, because it hasn't had time to do that yet.
That's scary.
That's scary, yes. So experts are predicting that El Niño won't really affect us much until later this year, and probably mostly in 2027. And that means that next year will be even worse, probably, as El Niño will reach full effect. And to be really cheerful about this, I read about an Australian project. I know we're the European Skeptics podcast, but the climate is global, right? But so there's an Australian project that they called Earth's Black Box. And it's sort of a monolithic structure to be built on Tasmania to bear witness to the climate crisis as it unfolds with scientific measurements and stuff. And according to the project's website, the 16-meter long, 4-meter high steel structure that will be topped with solar panels and stuff, it will record, quote, every step, end quote, of humanity's journey towards a climate catastrophe. So it says that hundreds of data sets, measurements and interactions relating to the health of our planet will be continuously collected and safely stored for future generations. And may I add, if there are any. But we will see if maybe if the aliens finally arrive here in the future, they can find this black box and they can interpret the data to find out how we arranged our own destruction. Cheerful, right?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Well, at least there are things that can be really used to tackle issues that humanity has, like alternative medicinal techniques, the so-called alternative medicinal treatments of things. And then there is anthroposophic medicine as well, the esoteric Steiner-inspired branch of alternative medicine that includes mistletoe therapy, eurythmy, and other non-evidence-based treatments. There was a new Austrian survey published in PLOS ONE that has uncovered a striking psychological pattern behind the appeal of anthroposophic medicine. The researchers surveyed 429 adults and found that people who view anthroposophic medicine as scientific tend to share several characteristics. They are more often older people with higher income and living in rural areas. But the strongest predictors weren't demographic, they were psychological. And the study reports that low tolerance for ambiguity, a stronger sense of personal control over health, and especially higher authoritarian attitudes were all significantly associated with believing that anthroposophic medicine is scientifically legitimate. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a small study. It's weird to even survey that, but it's a little bit like an application board for Ig Nobel Prize. But still, it's really interesting to see that association. The authors note that this aligns with long-observed parallels between esoteric worldviews and authoritarian thinking, including reliance on unquestionable authority and resistance to critical scrutiny. So women and people over 50 were also more likely to have used anthroposophic treatments at least once, and both groups showed higher overall preference for complementary and alternative medicine. And the authors argue that understanding these psychological and social drivers is essential for explaining why anthroposophic medicine, despite a lack of evidence for efficacy, continues to maintain cultural and institutional influence in parts of Europe. And part of that is the network of Steiner schools through which these ideas are propagated. So we shouldn't forget that either. The other interesting thing is that this kind of belief, according to the survey, did not necessarily translate into actual usage of anthroposophic medicine. It's only the belief of whether it's scientific or not. It's more about knowledge evaluation rather than treatment choice, apparently. Yeah. It's an interesting survey. I'm pretty sure it will be investigated further with other surveys like that.
Yeah, but the results sound familiar. We have heard similar things about these beliefs in the past as well.
That's correct.
Something that we haven't talked so much about on this show before is the great replacement conspiracy theory. It feels in a way for me, it has been feeling at least, as more of an American issue. But that may not be correct. And if you go back to the start, it actually started with a French guy who coined the phrase. And he didn't have the US in mind at all. Renaud Camus developed this conspiracy theory in 2 books published not long ago. I mean, it was 2010 and 2011. In 2010, he published a book called L'abécédaire de l'innocence. Abecedarium of no harm is the translation. So abecede, that means ABCD of no harm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a strange word. I had to look that up. In 2011, he published a book called Le Grand Replacement, Introduction au Replacisme Global. The Great Replacement, of course, Introduction to the Global Replacement in parentheses after. So according to this Camus guy, the indigenous French people, the replaced, as he called them, is being demographically replaced by non-white populations, mainly coming from Africa or the Middle East, through immigration encouraged by a replacist power, quote unquote, whoever that may be. He uses terms and concepts related to the periods of Nazi-occupied France. For example, he labels immigrants of non-European descent who reside in Europe colonizers or occupiers. So real classy stuff. This idea of the Great Replacement was then incorporated in a larger and older white genocide conspiracy theory popularized in the US by neo-Nazi David Lane in his 1995 White Genocide Manifesto. And in his manifesto, he asserted that governments in Western countries were intending to turn white people into, quote, an extinct species, end quote. So this is horrible stuff, obviously. Luckily so far, as I've said, we haven't seen so much talk about the Great Replacement theory in Europe. It's there, but it's been fairly fringe. The question is whether we are approaching a tipping point where it's coming out in the open more explicitly. We see things in the UK referred to this by Tommy Robinson and others. In recent days, the European Parliament voted to pass the final piece of the EU's new migration pact, the return regulation, I think that's what it's called. When the result was read out aloud in the plenary chamber in Strasbourg, members of the far right stood up, applauded and chanted, "Send them back, send them back." To be fair, they were met by a few responses, people who are calling back "shame on you" to the guys who said "send them back." But it's very uncomfortable and very disturbing to see this. This new law that was passed makes it possible to deport rejected asylum seekers to, quote, return hubs in countries outside the EU, not necessarily their own home countries. It also includes provisions for searches to locate undocumented individuals and longer detention periods and entry bans. There is a so-called solidarity mechanism in these rules as well. probably the most controversial part of it. The idea is that countries that do not want to accept their share of asylum seekers can instead contribute money to a EU fund. For 2026, this amounts to 420 million euros as an alternative to taking 21,000 refugees. So that comes to about 20,000 euros to get rid of one immigrant. And behind all of this, you can quite openly see in certain right-wing parties references to the Great Replacement Theory. In my city of Malmö, here in Sweden, a local radio station run by the Sweden Democrats, or SD, several respected politicians have recently been labeled as traitors for allegedly supporting a population replacement, quote unquote. So you see they're using the same wording. And they say that this population replacement will lead to the downfall of Western civilization.
Yeah.
Same station pointed out that traitors like this in the quote-unquote old days would have been exiled or executed. So they're really threatening people here. Several other statements in the show were there to clearly show that they're using the same language used by followers of the Great Replacement Theory. The show claimed, for instance, that 80% of the population of the city of Malmö is now of Muslim heritage, which is obviously absurd. But they just repeat these falsehoods again and again, and people think there's something in it.
And it will eventually stick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No.
Right. So the local SD politicians were questioned about this, and they suddenly wouldn't take any responsibility for what had been said on the program, despite the fact that the person who said these things is their own communications officer. And then mysteriously, suddenly, the archive with all of these episodes were suddenly gone from the internet, and you can't listen to them anymore. And when that was brought up, why did you delete them? So, we have a practice of removing old shows, and we hadn't done that for a while, so it was time to do it.
Oh, yeah. How convenient.
But this is how they operate. I'm not just talking about SD, because they're following the same playbook as the other right-wing extremists. They officially say that they toe the line, or pretend to toe the line, but then they let their underlings, in this case it was this communications officer, push the limit, and when it gets too far, they distance themselves from it. But slowly, bit by bit, they move what is acceptable to say further and further to the right and to the extreme.
Yeah. I wonder what the Celts would say to the people in France talking about the indigenous French people. Because, they were basically pushed out by other people. It was a great replacement, basically. This is why Celtic tribes are basically all gone from certain areas of the world. Because they were pushed out by immigration to certain areas.
Yeah. But you see, white immigrants are okay, you see. It's just the brown people. It's just the brown people that we have to be careful about. Then the irony of this is that you could look at Spain. I think we have mentioned this before. It is universally recognized that Spain has, over the last 4 to 5 years, turned their whole economy around by opening their borders to immigrants. From 2021 to 2025, the BNP per capita of Spain has increased by 33%. That's quite a lot.
Wow. That's a lot.
And this has been happening while the foreign-born population in Spain has increased from 7.4 million in 2021 to over 10 million in 2025. So it's gone from around 16% of the total population to over 20%. So you can, but this is science, and people don't want to look at science. But it shows that you can absolutely have a very positive outcome by allowing more immigration into your country. With falling birth rates, Europe desperately actually needs immigrants to fuel the economy, if you just look at the finance side of it, or the economy side of it. But of course, that doesn't sit very well with xenophobic racists. And just to finish off with the obvious, there is no great conspiracy to replace Europe's population. To the extent people are migrating to Europe, it is happening organically. And what's more, it's very often a positive thing. But who are these forces trying to do this, and how can they pull that off, and what's the conspiracy all about? It's not a conspiracy. It's happening. There's a lot of migration in the world. There's always been a lot of that, and especially now, maybe, but there's no conspiracy behind it.
Yeah, it's just happening organically. All right, that brings us to the end of the news round, which means that we're about to find out who's been really right or really wrong.
Yes, I think it was time for a really right this week. This is actually something that I talked about in December already, but now it's sort of final or has happened. And that is that the EU has eased restrictions on crops developed using CRISPR. So as I discussed in December, well, we talked a lot about GMO over the years and the EU's rather unreasonable stance against everything that has been genetically manipulated, because it sounds very scary and people don't want to talk about that. But when you manipulate plants with GMO instead of with traditional means, you know what's happening. You know what you're doing. You can switch on and off specific genes to have a specific outcome, which is what is happening in traditional changes to plants as well. It's just that you just do it by trial and error. You can do it chemically, you can do it by radiation, you can do it by cross-fertilization and things like that. But if you do it directly on the actual genes, you know what you're doing. And that's what's happening with GMO. And of course, you have to be careful, and of course, you need to make sure that you don't introduce something bad, but that can happen the other way as well. Anyway, what's going on now in the EU is that they have decided last week now to accept the proposal from December, which was that we will now talk about two different kinds of GMOs, the NGT1s versus the NGT2s, where NGT stands for New Genomic Technique. So NGT1 would include plants developed using CRISPR, meaning that there have been no introduction of any foreign DNA into the plant. It only manipulates what is already there. And NGT2 would be other GMO structures where you can actually add genes from another species. So NGT1 is going to be okay in the EU from now on, which it's a weak thing. I think they should have gone further, but I would still give the EU a really right for that, because it's a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, it will take a little bit of time. The European Commission will have to iron out the detailed regulation before it can take effect, and they say it will take until 2028 before you can actually start using these NGT1 crops or grow them in the EU. They have to produce manuals and regulations. Sometimes bureaucracy takes time, but still, it's a step in the right direction. So, okay, you'll get a really right from me for this.
I think it's well deserved. And the interesting thing is that it's a necessity to make this regulation and changes in regulation. We have huge challenges ahead of us, especially with global warming. We will need crops that are more capable of yielding enough produce with the changed environmental conditions. And we need the most modern techniques for that. And I think that is just something that shows that they have considered that fact. And that is good to see. Thank you very much for that, Pontus.
Thanks.
And my understanding is that we do have Who's Quacking this week as well.
Yes, we do, because we got some listener feedback, and I thought this fits best as a Who's Quacking segment. We got an email from Claudio from Rome, Italy. And we have heard from him before. As always, any listener who wants to contact us are very welcome to do so. We love knowing that people are actually listening to us, and we want to know what you have to say. And you give us, from time to time, very good tips on things to talk about. Anyway, the email from Claudio was triggered by our football talk last week. So you never know. We shouldn't ban any topic from this show. Sometimes it leads to something interesting. I expressed my surprise that Italy was not in this year's World Cup, but Claudio informs me that this is actually the third World Cup in a row when this has happened. And it just goes to show how much I know about football. But there's more. There's actually a skeptical story around this, at least a story of misinformation. So as you can understand, Italy repeatedly not qualifying to the World Cup is a sour spot for many Italians. Football is huge in Italy, and that probably helps to explain this story. There is this man called Paulo Zampolli, who Wikipedia describes as an Italian-American socialite, businessman, and former modeling agent, end quote. Mm-hmm. Zampolli was born in Italy, but he lives in the US, where he, through his model agency, met Donald Trump a long time ago, yes, and apparently became good friends with him. Zampolli also occurs several times in the Epstein files, and in one case, Epstein warned a businessman that Zampolli is trouble. So not even Epstein was very...
Not very impressed.
Not even Epstein trusted this guy. But what has happened now is that Zampolli is calling himself Special Envoy to Italy without actually having that official appointment from Trump. But he's just calling himself that. And back to football, he has tried now to lobby FIFA to replace Iran in the World Cup with Italy. Since, of course, the US is at war with Iran, his idea was that it should just swap the team because he said that Italy have the pedigree to justify this inclusion. They just deserve it.
Yeah, who cares that they didn't qualify?
So we know that FIFA has a reputation of being corrupt, but that's not how it works. So even the Italian sports minister, Andrea Abodi, had to comment on how preposterous this would be. And he said, quote, Italy's possible requalification for the 2026 World Cup, which US President Donald Trump's envoy, Paulo Zampolli, has reportedly proposed to FIFA, is firstly not possible and secondly not appropriate. End quote.
That's right.
Then he added what you said, quote, qualification is on the pitch, end quote. All right, so that's good. That was in April, but we're not done yet because Zampolli didn't give up. In May, when there started to be reports of the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, he argued that the football players of Congo were at risk of not being allowed into the US. So guess what his solution was? Yeah, we could swap out Congo for Italy instead.
Oh, yeah.
This was met with quite some pushback, even in Italy, even if Claudius says that for a few days this was a hot topic in many talks about the World Cup, with people polarized between the ones in favor of having Italy in the World Cup at any means and others who agree that a requalification would be, as we said before, not appropriate. So Claudio goes on to comment, quote, all of this strange effort for requalification of Italy was for trying to reconciliate Trump and Meloni, who are not in a good relationship after the critique of Trump toward Italy. I mean, Italy wouldn't follow Trump into the war against Iran, etc. And also some conflict with the Pope, because the Pope has also opposed the war and Trump didn't like that.
Yeah.
So I know we call this who's quacking, and that may sound like it's always had to be about medical quackery. But I think what we mean is that people who are sounding like quacks, quack, 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 and say stupid things, they are qualified to get there. So for that reason, I give Paulo Zampolli the title of Who's Quacking this week.
The quacker of the week. Yeah, okay. I think it's also very well deserved. I mean, this is just ridiculous to even suggest. Yeah. Even to FIFA, which lately at least has been known to make shit up just to appeal to the United States president.
Yeah.
The FIFA Peace Prize, that was the most ridiculous thing you can imagine. Anyhow, that brings us to the end of this show. I mean, not the whole show, this episode. Mm-hmm. And the episode's ending usually is marked with a quote. And this week's quote comes from a Swedish historian of science, Gunnar Eriksson.
Okay.
How's the pronunciation of the name?
Perfect.
Okay. So, what he said was this. Skepticism is inherent to the scientific attitude. For this reason, attention and ambivalence have arisen when science has sought to explain the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True that. True that. You can't be
right.
a science guy if you're not a good science person, if you're not skeptical and you don't question things. I mean, and you have to accept that there is tension and ambivalence and uncertainty. That's how we move forward.
Because there are expectations, and the tension will be generated by that the expectations don't always meet the actual evidence and data. But it should be going where the evidence leads you.
Exactly.
And not the other way around.
Right.
So, yes, I think this is pretty good. You have to question your own data as well, your own results. Okay, but that really brings us to the end of this week's episode. So I'd like to thank you, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Vissla.
This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social, like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
Driving me crazy. I don't know how you can believe.
People. Sorry. Oh, I started touching the mic.
Okay.
Fuck.
Don't do that. ¿Qué pasa?
The dogs are barking. I don't know.
Who is these? Who are? Yes, I've. Sorry.